Terrell Hills, there's something you need to understand before you make any decisions, because this is one of the most deceptively simple markets in San Antonio. And what I mean is that on the surface, it feels straightforward. It feels like a neighborhood where every home should just perform. It's got a strong location, consistent demand, established reputation, and even a level of stability that gives sellers confidence going into the process. But that confidence is exactly where a lot of sellers start to lose leverage. Not because the market is weak, but because it is selective, and selective markets do not reward average positioning. They reward precision, and precision is where most sellers fall short without even realizing it. The difference between a home that performs well in Terrell Hills and one that quietly underperforms is rarely something obvious like size or even condition on its own. It's usually the result of how the home is positioned before it ever hits the market. And the difficult part about that is that most of those decisions feel small when you're making them. They feel reasonable. They feel like standard steps. But in this neighborhood, standard approaches tend to produce below standard results. And those results show up in ways that are easy to misinterpret. Fewer showings than expected. Offers that come in softer than anticipated. Buyers who seem interested but hesitate. Homes that sit just long enough to start raising questions, and by the time those patterns become clear, the strongest window of opportunity has already passed. Terrell Hills is not a volume-driven market. It is a perception-driven market, and that means buyers are not just evaluating your home based on what it is. They are evaluating based on how it compares to what they believe it should be at that price point in that neighborhood, and that belief is already formed before they ever walk through your front door. Buyers in this area tend to come in prepared. They've seen other homes. They understand the range of quality, condition, and presentation that exist, and they are not just asking whether your home is good. They are asking whether it aligns with their expectations of what a home in Terrell Hills should feel like. And if that alignment is even slightly off, hesitation starts in immediately. That hesitation does not always show up in direct feedback. It shows up in behavior. It shows up in how quickly buyers move, how confidently they write an offer, and how strongly they negotiate. And this is where most sellers start to lose ground without even realizing it. The first thing you need to realize is to understand that your home is being judged against a standard, not just against other listings. In many neighborhoods, buyers are comparing homes side by side and making trade-offs between price, size, condition. But in Terrell Hills, buyers tend to have a clear internal benchmark. They have an idea of what a home like in a certain price should feel like, and that benchmark is influenced by everything they have seen leading up to your home, including properties that are no longer on the market. This means your home is entering a conversation that has already started, and if it does not align with that conversation, it becomes harder for buyers to justify moving forward, even if the numbers feel competitive. The second thing to understand is that condition matters, but cohesion matters more. Many sellers focus on individual updates or improvements, thinking that checking enough boxes will increase the value, but buyers are not evaluating your home as a checklist. They're evaluating how everything comes together. Does the home feel consistent from room to room? Do the finishes make sense together? Does the layout feel intentional, or does it feel like a series of disconnected decisions made over time? These are the questions buyers are asking, even if they're not saying them out loud. And when a home feels cohesive, it feels easier to understand. When it feels easier to understand, it feels easier to say yes to, and that ease is what drives stronger offers. The third thing, that pricing in Terrell Hills is highly sensitive to perception in the early stages of the listing. The first 7 to 10 days on the market are where your strongest opportunity exists, and that window is shaped entirely by how your home is introduced. If your pricing, presentation, and positioning are aligned, you capture attention immediately, and that attention creates momentum. If they are not aligned, you risk missing that initial wave, and once that happens, it is very difficult to recreate that same level of urgency. Price is not just a reflection of value. It is a signal that buyers like how they want to categorize your home, and that if those signals don't match the experience of the home, hesitation sets in before the showings even happen. The fourth thing that comes is then the preparation timelines are often misunderstood in this neighborhood. Many sellers assume that because Terrell Hills has consistent demand, preparation can be minimal. But in reality, preparation is one of the biggest drivers of outcome. This is where you create alignment before the market has a chance to respond. And that alignment does not happen in a week or two. It is built through a structured process that allows you to evaluate condition, make strategic decisions, and refine the presentation of the home so that it matches buyer expectations. When the preparation is rushed, small inconsistencies start to stack up, and those inconsistencies create friction. That friction is what slows buyers down, and in a market where buyers have a clear expectation, anything that slows them down works against you. The fifth thing that buyers psychology in Terrell Hills is that it's layered, and understanding how buyers think at different price points can significantly impact how your home is positioned. Buyers in lower price ranges tend to be more sensitive to condition and future costs. They are looking for predictability. Anything that introduces uncertainty can affect their willingness to move forward. In the mid-range pricing, buyers are looking for balance between functionality and design. They want the home to feel updated, cohesive, but also practical. In higher price ranges, buyers are focused more on overall experience, quality, and how the home aligns with their expectations for the neighborhood. They are less concerned with minor issues, but more sensitive to anything that feels out of place at a higher level, and understanding these differences allow you to position your home in a way that speaks directly to the buyer most likely to engage with it. The sixth thing is that inspections in Terrell Hills are not just about identifying issues, they are about confirming expectations. Buyers expect homes in this area to be well maintained. And when inspections reveal things that contradict that expectation, it can create a shift in confidence. And that shift does not just affect the negotiation, it affects how the buyer feels about the entire transaction. And that feeling can influence whether they move forward or start looking for reasons to step back. The seventh thing is that the markets need to match the level of expectations buyers have for the neighborhood. This is not about reaching the most people. It's about reaching the right people with a message that resonates. The way your home is presented online, the quality of the visuals, and the language used describe it all contribute to how buyers perceive it before they even step inside, and that perception shapes their experience. The eighth thing is that days on market in Terrell Hills are directly tied to how well the home is positioned at the beginning. Homes that are aligned tend to generate early activity. Homes that are not tend to sit longer, and as time on the market increases, buyer perception begins to shift. That shift can lead to lower offers, even if the home itself has not changed. The ninth thing is the negotiation in this market is more than just about price. Terms, timelines, structures all play into the role of determining the strength of an offer, and understanding how to evaluate those elements together allow you to make decisions that align with your goal. The 10th thing is that most of the mistakes sellers make in Terrell Hills happen before that home ever hits the market. Mispricing, over-improving, under-improving, or relying on generalized advice all create challenges that are difficult to create later. And this is why selling in this neighborhood is not about reacting to the market after you list. It's about preparing for the market before you list so that everything follows, that it flows in your favor. And this is usually the point where sellers start to realize what it feels like. A simple listing process is actually a sequence of decisions that all connect to each other. And even if one of those decisions is slightly misaligned, it begins to influence everything that follows. This is also where it makes sense to step back for a moment and give you context from where this perspective is coming from, because none of this is theoretical. It comes directly from working inside the markets like Terrell Hills and seeing how these patterns repeat over and over again. I'm Caroline, and I help sellers focusing in Central San Antonio, especially in neighborhoods where expectations are high and the margin for error is low. I want to help you understand sellers how to position their homes so they're not just listed, but understood immediately by buyers. Because in a market like this, understanding is what creates confidence, and confidence is what creates strong offers. And without that, even well-located homes can underperform in ways that are difficult to correct once the listing is live. This is where preparation becomes one of the most powerful tools you have, and also one of the most underestimated. When we talk about a 90, 60, 30-day preparation framework, what we're really talking about is giving each phase of the process a specific purpose so decisions are made with clarity instead of urgency. At the 90 stage, the focus is not cosmetic, it's foundational. This is where you step back, evaluate the home as a whole. This is where you look at the systems, conditions, and overall functionality in a very comprehensive way. Because the goal at this stage is not to fix everything, the goal is to understand everything. This is where inspections, evaluations, and early assessments come into play. Not because you expect perfection, but because you want to remove uncertainty, but before it becomes part of the transaction. One of the biggest shifts that happen when you approach preparation this way is that you move from reacting to issues to anticipating them. And that shift changes the entire tone of the process later. When a buyer discovers something unexpected during their inspection, it introduces doubt. And when you already understand your home and have a context around its condition, you're able to respond with clarity instead of defensiveness. And that difference directly affects how negotiations unfold. As you move into the 60-day phase, this is where strategy turns into execution. But this is also where discipline becomes critical, because one of the fastest ways to lose money in Terrell Hills is just to start making improvements without a clear framework. This is where sellers often begin updating based on what they think will look better rather than what actually creates alignment. And while the intention is to increase value, the result can actually create a disconnect. This phase should be guided by very specific questions. What needs to be refined so the home feels cohesive from start to finish? What needs to be addressed so that the home feels maintained and complete? What should remain untouched so the integrity and flow of the home are preserved? Because not everything needs to be changed. And in fact, over-improving in the wrong direction can reduce perceived value by creating inconsistency. Buyers in Terrell Hills are not just looking for updated homes. They're looking for homes that make sense. And when the updates feel disconnected or overly forced, it creates a hesitation. And hesitation weakens the offers. By the time you reach the final 30 days, the focus shifts to presentation. And this is where perception is fully shaped. This is where staging, layout, lighting, and fine details come together to create an experience that feels intentional from the moment a buyer walks in. Buyers are not just evaluating the features at this stage. They are deciding how easy it feels to move forward with the home. And ease is created through clarity. When a home is presented in a way that feels cohesive and aligned, buyers do not have to work to understand it. It makes sense immediately, and when something makes sense quickly, it reduces hesitation. That reduction in hesitation is what allows buyers to act with more confidence. And that confidence is what leads to stronger offers and clearer negotiations. Now, as the preparation transitions into pricing, this is where many sellers rely too heavily on numbers without fully accounting for how those numbers will be interpreted. Pricing in Terrell Hills is not just about comparable sales. It's about how your home fits in within the current landscape of buyer expectations. This is where pricing psychology becomes critical. When a buyer sees your home online, the price is the first filter they apply, and that price immediately creates an expectation about what they are about to experience. If the experience of the home matches or slightly exceeds that expectation, the buyer feels validated. If it falls short even slightly, hesitation begins it before they even step inside. That's why pricing has to align with perception, not just data. A well-positioned price creates curiosity and engagement. A misaligned price creates doubt, and doubt resists activity. Another important layer is how pricing interacts with the first 7 to 10 days on market. This is where momentum is either created or missed, and momentum is one of the most valuable assets you have as a seller. When a home enters the market with the right combination of pricing and presentation, it captures attention early, and that attention creates a sense of movement around the listing. As buyers begin to see it as something that others are interested in, that perception can influence how quickly they act. And when a home enters the market without alignment, activity is slower. And slower activity changes how the buyers interpret the opportunity. Instead of feeling like something they need to move on, it starts to feel like something they can wait on. And when buyers feel like they can wait, well, they often do. And that is where leverage begins to shift away from the sellers. As offers begin to come in, this is where understanding the full structure of the deal becomes critical. One of the most common mistakes sellers make is focusing primarily on the price without fully evaluating the terms that come with it. Price is only one part of the equation. Terms, timelines, contingencies, and the overall structure contribute to the strength of an offer, and in many cases, a slightly lower price with cleaner terms can produce a better overall outcome than a higher price that introduces uncertainty. This is where preparation once again becomes an advantage, because when you understand your position clearly, you're able to evaluate offers from a place of confidence rather than reaction. You're able to see where there's flexibility, where there is risk, and how to structure a response that keeps a transaction moving forward in a direction that aligns with your goals. Inspection negotiations are another point where preparation has a direct impact. Buyers in Terrell Hills typically come in with expectations that a home will be well maintained. And when inspections reveal things that feel inconsistent with that expectation, it can create a shift in confidence. That shift does not just affect the negotiation, it affects how the buyer feels about the home as a whole. And that feeling can influence whether they move forward or begin looking for reasons to step back. When you have already identified potential concerns and you have a context around them, you are able to approach these conversations with clarity, and that clarity helps buyers maintain confidence. Confidence actually just keeps deals together, and the uncertainty is what causes them to fall apart. As you step back and look at how all these elements connect, what becomes clear is that selling in Terrell Hills is not about doing more. It's about doing the right things in the right order with the right level of attention. Preparation influences pricing. Pricing influences activity. Activity influences leverage, and leverage influences negotiation. And when all of these steps are aligned, the process becomes more predictable and more controlled. When they are not, the whole process becomes reactive, and a reactive process tends to produce less consistent outcomes. And this is where everything we've talked about starts to become much clearer when you walk through it in a real world context, because understanding the concepts is one thing, but seeing how they actually play out is what allows you to apply them correctly. And this is where most sellers begin to realize how small decisions early in the process can create very different outcomes later. So imagine a home in Terrell Hills that is getting ready to come on the market. It has strong fundamentals. The location is solid. The square footage is competitive. There have been updates made over time, and on paper, it appears to check all the boxes that sellers believe will drive a strong result. But as you walk through the home, there are subtle inconsistencies that begin to show up. The finishes do not quite align room to room. The lighting choices feel disconnected from the overall style of the home. There are a few areas where maintenance, it's been deferred, and there's not enough to make it stand out individually, but enough to collectively create a sense that the home is not fully dialed in. None of these things are major issues on their own, but this is exactly where sellers miscalculate, because they evaluate each item independently and assume that none of them will significantly impact the outcome. But buyers do not experience homes that way. They experience them as a whole, and when these small inconsistencies stack together, they create friction, and the friction shows up as hesitation. Now compare that to another home, potentially even slightly smaller, priced slightly higher, but everything feels aligned. The finishes make sense. The layout flows naturally. The presentation feels intentional from the moment you walk in, and buyers do not have to work to understand what they're seeing. It makes sense immediately, and when something makes sense quickly, it reduces hesitation. That reduction in hesitation is what allows buyers to move forward with confidence, and that confidence is what drives stronger offers. This is the difference between a home that generates early momentum and one that struggles to gain traction. And it has very little to do with the metrics that most sellers focus on, and it has much more to do with how the home is experienced. Now layer pricing into the scenario, because this is where the impact becomes even more clear. If the first home, the one with the inconsistency, is priced at the top of the range based on comparable sales, it creates a gap between expectation and experience. Buyers walk in expecting one level of alignment and encounters something slightly below that. That gap creates hesitation immediately. They begin to question the value. They begin to look more critically at details they might have otherwise overlooked. And even if they are still interested, the way they write their offer reflects that hesitation. They may come in lower, they may include more contingencies, or they may decide to wait and see if the price adjusts. When multiple buyers take that approach, momentum slows. And once momentum slows, leverage begins to shift. I'm Caroline Deckard with the Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company. I would love to help you sell your home in Terrell Hills. If you have questions, call us. We're always happy to give a consultation and tell you our thoughts. Have a great day.